Greetings, I'm Ted Simpson, and welcome to my series of talks on Sicily, island of history, beauty, diversity, as well as great wines and foods. We'll start our series of talks with an introduction to Sicily, a little overview of the history as well as some of the geography of the island. We'll then visit 5 major regions, starting with Taormina, then moving into the beautiful Mount Etna area. We'll travel along the west coast to the historic Syracuse, which at one time in the ancient world was one of the largest cities in the Mediterranean. We'll then cross over to Agrigento, which has some incredible ruins dating back from the Greek era. We'll end our tour up at Palermo, which is a beautiful coastline, a lot of Norman architecture, as well as more recent history, including some things, of course, with the mafia. So let's get started with our introduction to Sicily and a background of this amazing island where you can experience a lot of the Mediterranean all in one location. When I say Sicily, what first comes to your mind? Greek civilization? The Vikings, perhaps. How about the mafia? Volcanoes, beautiful scenery, beaches, other things? Well, actually, all of these answers are correct. And probably the most common thing people think of when they hear about Sicily is the mafia. And we'll be taking a little look at some of the roots of the mafia and how it was part of the Sicilian culture. However, today, Sicilians will tell you that Sicily is not about the mafia, and the mafia is not Sicily. But we'll be also taking a look at how it has played a major role. We'll also visit Savoca, where The Godfather was filmed. So why visit Sicily? Well, I guess we could ask that about anywhere, couldn't we? Why go anywhere? I think we go places because we want to experience different areas and make them part of us, and that's the best way to do this. To learn about the history and the people and the cultures, to try local foods and drinks. Of course, beautiful scenery is a great reason to visit many locations, as well as many people love a good beach, and Sicily has both of these. History is also right around every corner, and one of the great ways to learn history is to visit locations where historical events have actually occurred. There's the people and the culture, and Sicily is a melting pot of many different Mediterranean peoples. The foods and the wines, there are many seafoods, the fruits grow very well in this climate. It's amazing how large the lemons are. And of course, limoncello is one of the popular drinks of Sicily. Then we have the red wines from the Nero grapes, and these are often grown in the volcanic rich soils near Mount Etna. The white wines tend to be more on the north and west side of the island. There are many ways to travel. We use Trafalgar for part of our tour, but there are many great tour companies, or you may choose to go to specific destinations and explore on your own. And I hope this presentation will be an appetizer to increase your desire to visit Sicily and to give you some ideas of areas you would like to explore in your own way. So let's get started taking a look at Sicily. Putting Sicily on the map then. Sicily is basically the soccer ball, the Europeans might call it, at the toe of the Italian boot. It's the largest island in the Mediterranean, and its triangular shape, based on these 3 major promontories, have earned it the name Trinacria since early Greek times. Sicily, along with the boot of Italy, separates the Tyrrhenian Sea from the Ionian Sea. And the difference in these sea heights creates strong currents through the strait between Sicily and Italy. These strong currents create whirlpools and eddies which were disastrous to early wooden ships and are described by Homer in his stories. Sicily sits on the fault line between the African plate to the south and the Eurasian plate to the north. The volcano, located on Sicily called Mount Etna, is a product of these plate movements, and it's the highest volcano in Europe. The plates also create these promontories, or three major mountain chains that emanate from the center of Sicily. The Trinacria is the official certified emblem of Sicily. And this emblem goes back to the early Greek times, and is derived from a myth of three nymphs who danced about the world gathering fruits and grains and stones and good soil, and they stashed it all in the sea to create Sicily. When we think about the significance of Sicily as an agricultural region back in the Greek and Roman times, you can see where this myth is derived from. The three running legs of the nymph represent the three promontories of Sicily. And of course, in the center we see the nymph, along with the clusters of grapes representing the grains and the fruits that were able to be grown in Sicily. Sicily has a number of historical periods that have all had a major role to play in the various locations that we'll be visiting. Starting with the early history, the Siculi and the Phoenician people, the Carthaginians, then going into the Greek, Romans, the Arabs had their time there, and then the Normans came in, major changes in architecture and culture, and then medieval period, which was of course a backward period, ending in the 1700s. Next, we'll take a quick look at each of these periods and how they affect Sicily and the areas that we'll be visiting. The early histories take us back to 3000 BC into the Neolithic Age. During these times, people arrived from a number of locations, including Africa, Italy, and the Siculi people, which included Iberians from Spain, all found their way to the island of Sicily. And they were here when the Phoenicians came. The Phoenicians were great traders, setting up trade routes and a number of colonies around the Mediterranean, including Carthage and Palermo. The people at Carthage interacted and bred and married people from Africa, eventually becoming the Carthaginians or Punic people. So a lot of the trade routes became known as the Punic trade routes. And of course this will take us into Roman times, where we have a lot of the Punic Wars about these trade routes. The Greeks enter the picture about 735 BC, establishing major cities along the eastern coast, including Messana in the north, and Naxos, which is actually one of the first cities established, and right up from Naxos is Taormina. Then down the coast we have Syracuse, which became the richest, largest city of its time. And there were a number of battles, of course, fought between the Carthaginians and the Greeks, but also amongst the Greeks, especially near the city of Syracuse, where the Athenians attacked to take over the city, which had been more or less held by the Corinthians. Also, a lot of temples and theaters were built all the way from Taormina and Syracuse and over to Agrigento, where we have the Valley of the Temples that we'll be visiting. Eventually, during the Second Punic War, the Romans took over the island of Sicily, and one of the last major battles was the Battle of Mount Eris, and we'll be taking a look at that Mount Eris area in a later talk. So at this point, around 210 BC, the Roman consul Valerius declares to the Senate that there are no Carthaginians left in Sicily. And Sicily was not Romanized but left as a Greek culture, becoming the breadbasket for Rome, as it also had been for Greece. During this time, large landed estates by the Roman nobles were established, and many of these still influence the way agriculture is done in Sicily today. As the Western Roman Empire collapsed, the Byzantines took over control of Sicily, from actually establishing a capital there near Palermo. Around 900, the Arabs' influence became predominant, occupying Palermo as their capital until 1090. Some of the greatest contributions of the Arabs were the citrus fruits and nuts such as pistachio, oranges, and lemons, and sugarcane. The soil and the volcanic soil from Mount Etna had really created a very fertile environment for these citrus fruits. And the lemons, it's amazing today how big the lemons are. And Sicily became a major exporter of lemons during the 1700s as a prevention for scurvy. Well, the Arabs allowed pretty nominal freedom of Christian religion, but unlike in Spain, we have minimal Arab architecture, except near the city of Palermo. Well, the Norman period starts around 1000 AD with Viking mercenaries in southern Italy participating against the Byzantine Empire on behalf of the Roman Pope. And one of the key players was the Hauteville family from Norway. And in 1061 AD, they captured Messana and then went on to capture Palermo. And two major players were Robert and his brother Roger, both of the Hauteville family, and their band of knights, which ended up taking over these major Arab centers. During the Norman period, we had quite a time of peace and multicultural harmony. And great leaders like Roger II built the Cathedral of Montreal, which we will look at in later talk. King Frederick was a very enlightened king. He did a lot in the sciences and was quite a reader and studier. And Manfred, the son of Frederick, then ruled until 1266. Well, 1266 was kind of a turning point as we get into the Middle Ages. Now, France overthrew Manfred, and the Norman rule ends. And we'll talk a bit more about this later, but this is where the term mafia comes into use. An insurrection then occurred not long after this, in 1282, that put Peter III from Aragon, Spain, as ruler of Sicily. And Spanish rule continued and consolidated when Castile and Aragon united in 1479. And we have the golden age of wheat exports taking place. The Spanish rule continues from Naples during what we typically call the Bourbon period of the 1700s. And as I mentioned earlier, lemons became a major crop for sea voyages in order to prevent scurvy. In summary then, there are many reasons why you might want to visit Sicily. Its beautiful scenery and coastline. Mount Etna is Europe's highest active volcano. There's many historical sites from ancient Greek and Roman times. And there's beautiful architecture, including castles and cathedrals. There's a mix of cultures with many foods and drinks, great beaches, many things to experience in Sicily. And in the next 5 talks, we'll be covering these regions, starting here with Taormina and Messana right across the strait, and then going in our second talk to Mount Etna region, then down the coast to Syracuse, look at some of the ruins and sights to see there, and then up the west coast to Agrigento to take a look at the Valley of Temples. We'll then end up in our 5th talk looking at Palermo, the architecture and the beauty of that coastline as well as its rich history. So until then, I hope you found this talk useful, and thanks for taking the time to watch.